Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers.
Daniel Ellsberg is the most dangerous man in America. He must be stopped at all costs. That's what Henry Kissinger, the National Security Advisor, said to President Nixon. What does it take for a whistleblower to be called the most dangerous man in America? For Daniel Ellsberg, the answer was simple: the truth. In the 1960s, a 7,000-page top-secret report on the United States' involvement in the Vietnam War, called The History of the U.S. Decision-Making Process on Vietnam, later known as the Pentagon Papers, was secretly conducted by the U.S. government to try to figure out why the war was unwinnable. Daniel Ellsberg, a military analyst who had access to the project, read the report and discovered the shocking truth.
That what we are doing now in Vietnam is vital not only to the security of Southeast Asia, but it is vital to the security of every American.
The government had been lying to the people and even the Congress about the Vietnam War, believing that the people have the right to know the truth and feeling that he had the responsibility to put an end to the unjust war. Ellsberg leaked the Pentagon Papers to the press in order to tell the public about the realities of the war in Vietnam. Although the release of the Pentagon Papers did not put an immediate stop to the Vietnam War like Ellsberg had hoped, it still had a strong impact on the rights and responsibilities of the press, the U.S. government, and the American people. It all started when Daniel Ellsberg began working at the Rand Corporation as a military analyst. He described himself at the time a dedicated Cold Warrior, having joined the Marines and furthering his work afterwards to stop communism and nuclear war with the Soviet Union. Ellsberg agreed that the United States' involvement in Vietnam should stop the spread of communism. The Vietnam War was a long conflict that started in 1954 after the Vietnamese defeated the French colonizers. It split into North Vietnam and South Vietnam because the North wanted to follow communism. The United States worried that if Vietnam was communist, the entire region will fall to communism like the domino effect. The U.S. allied with the South to stop the spread. The war continued on, and in the end, over 58,000 U.S. troops and over 1.1 million Vietnamese troops were killed in action. Over 2 million Vietnamese civilians were killed. Daniel Ellsberg thought he was doing good for everyone, stopping communism and protecting his nation. After a trip to Vietnam confirming that the war was unwinnable, and after reading and analyzing the Pentagon Papers, he realized the war was unjust and the government was lying to the people when they told him they were winning the war. Knowing this, he felt he had the responsibility to do what he could do to end the war. That was when he decided to make copies of the top-secret Pentagon Papers. When he left work each night, he would take out a volume of the Pentagon Papers from his safe in his office and take it with him to copy it with his friend Anthony Russo's help. Thinking that he would most likely go to prison for this, he brought his 2 children with him to spend time with them. They helped him make copies as well and cut the top paper that said Top Secret. After making 15 copies of the Pentagon Papers, he gave a copy of it to a couple senators that he thought might help. They refused to help. Senator William Fulbright was worried about breaking the rules of the Senate, and Senator George McGovern was planning to run for president and did not want to ruin his chances. Ellsberg realized that Congress was not going to release anything. Inspired by the anti-war protests and the courage of those who were arrested for refusing the draft, he knew he had the responsibility to release the papers to the public. He then gave a copy to Neil Sheehan, reporter for the New York Times. He has now released them to the press. On June 13, 1971, the New York Times printed the first article, Vietnam Archive. Pentagon study traces 3 decades of growing U.S. involvement. In the beginning, President Nixon was not too alarmed by the release of the Pentagon Papers since they were all about the previous presidents. However, Henry Kissinger, his security advisor, pointed out the danger of showing other countries that the United States can't keep secrets, and Nixon too will be for the blame. Shortly after the leak, President Nixon's administration ordered the newspaper to stop printing more top-secret information to protect national security. While the New York Times stopped printing, Ellsberg gave a copy of the Pentagon Papers to the Washington Post. They were ordered to stop as well. Ellsberg then gave it to the Boston Globe. The government's action to stop the press from releasing secret information started a controversy because it violated the right to freedom of the press and the First Amendment. This led to the Supreme Court case, New York Times versus the United States. Argument for the government to be able to stop the press was that it could affect the right of the president as commander-in-chief to fulfill his responsibilities that was granted by the Constitution. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that the press has the right and responsibility to inform the people of the truth, even in cases involving national security as long as there's no danger from it. Since the top secret information was about the past, it would not cause irreparable damage to the current operations in the war. This marked history because it upheld the right to freedom of the press even in times of war and even with classified information. This led to the importance of Justice Hugo L. Black explaining that only a free, unrestrained press can effectively expose deception in government. This decision makes it more difficult for the government to censor the press. Having lost the case against the press, Nixon's administration went after Ellsberg. Quit making national heroes out of those who steal secrets and publish them in the newspaper. Richard Nixon. Worried that Ellsberg would get away with it and not wanting anyone else to think they can get away with leaking government information, he created the White House Special Investigations Unit, known as the Plumbers, to stop leaks. They broke into Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office to try to find evidence against Ellsberg to ruin him. They also bugged his phone. When this illegal behavior was discovered, the judge dismissed the charges against Ellsberg because of the misconduct by the government. The formations and the actions of the Plumbers ultimately contributed to President Nixon's downfall, as their illegal activities led to the Watergate scandal, which forced Nixon to resign. The Watergate scandal, in combination with the Pentagon Papers, exposing decades of lies and had a lasting impact on the people's trust in the government. A poll measuring the public's trust in federal government done by the Pew Research Center, this shows a chart that in 1958, 73% of Americans trusted the federal government to do the right thing, always or most of the time. Trust started dropping during the 1960s because of the Vietnam War, then dropped even more to 53% after the Pentagon Papers, and then to 36% after the Watergate scandal. The trust in the government had never been the same since. The release of the Pentagon Papers did lead to an increase of the anti-war movement. More protests occurred, and there was less support for the war. Although it may have helped some, it did not lead to a quick end of the war as Ellsberg had hoped. The war did not end until 1975, 4 years after the leak. Daniel Ellsberg's decision to release the Pentagon Papers shows the importance of balancing rights and responsibilities of individuals, the government, and the press. When he decided to leak classified information, Ellsberg took on the responsibility to inform the American people about the government deception and hopefully end the unwinnable war, where so many people were getting killed. The people had the right to know the truth. The court case that followed, New York Times versus the United States, defended the responsibility of the press to seek and reveal the truth, even if it's against the government. It supports that the press holds the right to question and expose government actions, protecting democracy and people's right to know. It also reminds us of the government's responsibility to both protect national security and be honest with the people that elected them and who they serve. Not balancing that and abusing presidential rights led to the President Nixon's downfall. Ellsberg's actions and the aftermath show the balance that is needed between the responsibilities of maintaining security and protecting democratic rights. His courage as a whistleblower reminds us that we have the right and responsibility to act and benefit our society as a whole.